Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. On today's show, we're going to be talking about how to build virtual sets, how you can actually take and look at the different components that go into it, assemble them, and present that as a single composited view for a basically the set of your imagination, anything you'd like to put together. Uh, in the show, we're going to cover, and we're going to start with sort of some of the basics, basically looking at multi-box effects and how you'd put those together using vMix. We're also going to look at keying and sort of that single layer keyed talent over a backdrop. Uh, we're going to look at something that's really critical to understanding how to do complex virtual sets, which are called UV maps or UV gradients. So we'll go into detail about how that plays a role. And then we're going to look at building a complete virtual set inside of vMix, and then also look at building that a similar set inside of the TriCaster. And there will be some interesting things we can show to end up uh, that add a lot of realism to the set you create. And one of these things is specifically on the TriCaster. So I'm excited to show you that. Uh, so I want to remind everybody that, as usual, we will be taking video call-ins. So if you'd like to join us on air, ask a question, share some of your experiences with virtual sets or your feelings about using virtual sets, uh, you know, we'd love to have you. Also, anybody that wants to share in the comments, we're always looking forward to that. So please join the show, whatever way is comfortable for you. Uh, so I started this last week, and we're going to see how it plays out. But I'd like each show to be asking a question that will help me understand more about where everyone's interests are in the subject that we're covering. So for this week, I really wanted to focus on virtual sets. So what kind of set would work best for you in your productions? Would it be a physical set or would it be a virtual set? So if you just type the word physical or word virtual in sort of the community section of whatever channel you're viewing this over, YouTube or Facebook, that would be great. So let's get started. And I'm going to take a look now at vMix here and show you some of the elements that would go into doing a multi-box shot. Now, multi-boxes, if you watch the news, they're the most common kind of shot that you see on the air today. So typically, it's a shot where you have a host and one or several guests, and they're all interacting with each other. So for this type of shot, you're basically dealing with video inputs that are coming in and then a framework that you're compositing these inputs into. So in this case, if you look, we have video coming into the host, we have video of guest one and video of guest two over here. So these are all the elements that are going into creating the video elements. And then we also have a framework that we're putting them in. So this allows us to, this is where you'd see any sort of branding or station IDs or any of those bugs. And this gives you a nice visual representation for your viewers to understand, who's involved in the flow of the conversation. So the way this is constructed in vMix, but really in almost anything, is through layering. We put these together as a composited set of assets. So if I go here where I have the multi-box shot uh, already assembled, let me click in here. The way we do this is through something in vMix called multi-view. So in this case, we have 4 layers in this multi-view. And that's what multi-view lets you do, stack up layers one on top of the other. So at the base, we have our framework. And that's how we, sort of set the backdrop. And then we have our guest A, B, and the host. Now, the way this all works is that in this multi-box framework, in the multi-view framework that vMix provides, we can actually take and position each one of these assets specifically laid out on the screen. So we can control the zoom. So we have it zoomed way down in this case. We can control the cropping on the sides. we can control the panning and positioning. So we have the ability to position this whatever way we want in the set. And that's true for all of these elements. So when we have these together now, each of these are just cropped elements of the original assets that are zoomed and scale that are scaled and positioned in the multi-box framework. But one of the things that you get from this, and it's not specific to virtual sets, but something that can be very useful when you use multi-boxes. There is a transition in vMix called the merge transition. And what this merge transition will let you do is take an asset, like in this case, the host that's already in the on-screen element, and then merge with that same element that would be coming in as a new video source. And you'd see something like this, where now that element, as opposed to just flipping over or fading in, it zooms up and scales out from the position it was in to take on the full screen position it has here. And you can again do the same thing to go back where it would shrink in. And this would work very easily by just having any one of the guests that may be on air or the host that you'd want to bring out and do the same thing now. So it's a very simple way to create what is effectively a virtual set, a virtual space where you have guests from multiple locations interacting with the host. So this is really a good start point for thinking about virtual sets because that's kind of what we're doing here, creating that space that you want to interact in. So let's take the next look up, which is probably the place that most people go when they think about a virtual set, and that's Chroma Key. So if I come over here, let me just cut this in and I'll stop that. I don't want it playing. Uh, and let me show you here. So what I have here are two layers that we'd like to composite, but now as a chroma key where there's talent in the foreground, this gentleman here with the VR headset on, and there is imagery in the background that we're going to be using. So the first thing that we need to do though is we need to actually key out the talent. So if I open this up, inside of vMix on this input, there's something called Color Key. Now, Color Key will let me pick a color that I want to, what's called key out. And keying effectively is telling your system to take anything that is this specific color that you're keying and make it transparent. Create an alpha channel for that video image in that location. So if I come here, the way you do this is you pick the dropper, and you can go down, it will open up a window and you can go and pick the area that you want. You can do any additional dialing you want for the strength of it or, filtering the edges or how you want to do aliasing. All those things are in here too. But now what I've done in this key is make this background transparent. And because it's transparent, I can actually, if I just cut this out here, I can actually just layer this on here. So all the elements that we had in the multi-box effect we did apply here as well. So if you look what I'm really doing is I'm doing a multi-view again. I have a foreground and a background object. But in this case, as opposed to scaling the foreground objects to make them fit, I'm actually keying it out. But I also have that same ability. So if I wanted to come here and let me just reset this, he could now actually, and I could reset positioning. So now what I've actually done is taken the host and repositioned them, set them all up to fit on this screen. But it's the same basic tool we were using before. The multi-view component of vMix now combined with Chroma Key. But there's two things to keep in mind when you look at Chroma Key talent. The first is that your backdrop can be anything. So it can be like we have in this case, video, which is supposed to represent what he's seeing in his VR headset. But it could also be a still, or it could also be a camera that you have pointed at something. So if you wanted to do something where talent is talking in front of, a video of something that's going on, or for video gamers, this could be something that they use all the time where they're taking a screen coming in and using that as a way to sort of key themselves over something going on. And so this really introduces the next new concept, which is keying. And that's sort of critical to everything that you do, sort of with anything that's more sophisticated on the virtual set front. So let me just stop this. And I want to talk about the next thing, which is probably one of the critical things that would be a takeaway from what we talk about today. And that is UV gradients. So let me see if I can get this thing all set up here. Do this here. So I'm going to put this, cut this in, and then set this here. So this is a UV gradient. But what is it? It's a composite of different colors that are put into a space. But to understand what it does, let me take a step back and talk a bit about the types of things you need to do inside a virtual set. Uh, in virtual sets, what we're trying to do is we're trying to simulate in a sophisticated virtual set a 3D environment. So this is a space with depth, a space where you have objects that have shape, it's three-dimensional. So you want to have some way where you can take video or images that will be part of your show, part of your set, and map them onto specific things that are in that set. And that's what gradients do. What a gradient is, for those who want to sort of dig that level down, it is basically a grayscale gradient uh, that exists in two of the three color channels. It exists in the red channel and the green channel, but it doesn't exist in the blue channel. The reason you do that is that it gives you a luminance value then for your red and your green in a way now that each pixel in this map has its own coordinate, which is basically the value of the red gradient and the value of the green gradient. So you have a two-dimensional coordinate system now built into color that you can take an image or a camera feed or any other visual asset and map it to. So let me just give you a better concept here. This is the same gradient. On the left, though, what you have is the gradient in its sort of rectilinear fashion. It's just they cut out the same shape, 16 by 9, as you'd have from video coming in on a camera. On the right, though, what I've simulated is I simulated taking that flat 16 by 9 image and now curving it. So if I had a big wall or something that would be behind a stage, this would represent how an image would actually look in that space. So let me just I have a camera right here, and I'm just going to take that and I'm going to map it to these gradients. So what you see here now are identical video images, but in the first case, it's just the square mapping pixel for pixel. And on the right-hand side now, it's that curved distorted map. So if you notice, as I go up here, you can see my hand is going to the same position. You're basically seeing pretty much identical images here. It's just perspective-wise changed to create the illusion of depth, where the part in the middle is further back and the parts on the sides are curved out. It's had a little bit of a slant, sort of coming out from a corner. So this is the sort of thing where you could have video playing while a host was in front of this talking. So this gives you now not only the ability to take any type of image you want, you can take that image and map it to any type of shape you want. So gradients effectively give us three dimensions to work with when we bring images in. So that's sort of the third leg that we talked about, where it's compositing and layout, it's chroma keying, and it's gradients to do 3D positioning. So let's put all these things together and start to look at this in constructing a virtual set. So let's go over here. All right. So I'll jump in by just sort of showing you what it is that we're looking to create and what's available on here. So this is a virtual set I put together, which combines all of these different things that we've talked about. So we have a backdrop here, which are all these boxes with the spray painted video game central. We have talent, which is being keyed in over the backdrop. We have, which is the first time we've shown this, we actually have a foreground object now. The desk, in this case, is positioned in front of the talent. So now we've created another step in this compositing process with layering, but that's all part of what we saw in the multi-view capabilities in vMix. Uh, in the corner over here, we have a video monitor. And this video monitor is actually just a scaled down size. So we just took the video image that we have, this one, I think, right over here, which is plain, and we just shrunk it down and fit it into the monitor on the side. But in front now, what we actually did is we used a gradient to map another image into the front panels of these two boxes that form the front of the desk. So you can see these are at different angles to each other slightly, and it's cut up and split, but it is just a continuous video. It's just split across these two boxes. So that is what you see if you look here. So these would be the UV maps that we use to map the talent in here. And this would be the UV map that we're using to map the desk. And so in each of these cases, these things are all separate elements. And if I come over here, this view that you have now is an actual virtual set that we built for vMix. So if here in the virtual set, there's a setup capability where I can go in and replace every one of the objects with my own objects that I want to put in here. So in this case, we have the display, which is the video that's showing here. We have the set background, which is these. We have the talent, the foreground video, and the desk, the foreground desk and the video on the desk. So I can, if I want to, just through vMix's own interface, change any of these. So if I wanted to change what's in the display here, I could go and pick another video game clip. And so now I have something different. Or if I wanted to change what's in the desk, again, very, very simply now, I could go in here and let's see, desk video, we'll go to one, which is a little spookier looking, but gives you a different video. So here I have the ability to just do this type of mapping. And the reason I can do that is because I've described the relationship of all these objects to vMix. And I did that using, let me get over here, using an XML file. So if, let's see, okay. So this is how you create a virtual set in vMix. So in this case now, I have an XML that identifies each of these objects, names them. So I have some way of identifying what it is. When you saw down here, I said, okay, what are the different elements that I have? These are all the different layers that you see named here. So that's how it comes in. The other thing is you have the ability inside of vMix to say, I want to use a UV map for this image. So when you select an image for it, what you're telling vMix to do is say, take the image I select and map that to the UV map that I told you is part of this set. So in this case, the display, I actually use the UV map, but it's basically just zoomed down and positioned on screen. So there's nothing, special about that. And that would have been easily done with sort of crop and position. The set background is a standard image. And you can see here now, I just have it in there. It's got no zoom, it's got no positioning, no rotation, but it's using the set background.png file, which is something we set up in this virtual set as being an asset that's available for the background. For the talent, again, we're using a UV map. And, this is positioned and rotated slightly to become, to blend with the angle of the set. And this also has the UV map. So what I'm telling vMix to do is to take whatever the asset is that is mapped in here. In this case, this is our little game geek here, and map that to the UV map we have set here. And so again, I don't have to go through this in complete detail, but I think you're understanding the basic framework that's used for creating these types of virtual sets in vMix. You describe all the elements and how they relate. You map the UV maps, and then you can assign to the UV maps the images you want to put in place. So this is really very, very powerful now, because not only can you describe a set and have all those elements bundled, But using UV maps, you can also have things that are easy to swap out and blend nicely into your set. So if I go through this, let me sort of jump in here. These were the two components that were really part of this set, where I have a foreground component and a background component. And when I looked at these things as elements, they're all flat. But what we try to do is in video search, it's often called 2.5D. It's not quite 3D, but by doing this type of stacking we have inside the system, so let me, this sort of thing here where I can cut that in and we'll just put here. So these are just layered on top. So the desk now has more depth to it because I put something behind it. So I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the other elements that we didn't see on the first page. But now I we use TriCaster here for running our productions. So I want to spend a little time showing you how you would do a very similar set, but using a TriCaster. So on the TriCaster, what they provide is a framework where you can use a Photoshop file with different layers to describe everything that you're going to be doing inside your set. And then they have a utility called Virtual Set Editor that takes that Photoshop file and compiles it into a virtual set that can be installed on the TriCaster. So let me show you a couple of things. And then I guess we'll just jump to the end here with this is the set that we put together. So slightly different coloration, same basic elements though. A monitor, a split set in the front with on the desk where we have multiple elements side to side, and we have talent sitting over here. So let me show you how that would be done inside of Photoshop. So let me just cut this over here. Okay, so if you look at this, this is the Photoshop. And actually, let me just zoom this in a little bit more here. So what I have in this Photoshop file are all the gradients that are now positioned and laid out. And I have all the framework elements that we have for the set pieces, the foreground desk and the background. And I'm trying to make sure you all can see this here, but these are the elements inside Photoshop as we have it laid out. So I have just a white background. The next thing I have is something that I have a special name called input B, which is saying in the TriCaster, take whatever is on the mix effects bus as input B and map it to this gradient. And so that's the gradient we're actually using for the monitor. Then in front of that, I have the set itself with the cutout layer for where the monitor shows through. So you have that sort of stacking. Then above that, I have the talent, which is positioned in the corner and slightly, tilted. And what you'll notice here is that, again, with this, I name this now as input A, because this is taking what will be on the A channel in the mix effect. And again, it's a very logical process of just layered elements that are sitting here. Uh, so then I put the desk in front of the talent, again, trying to create that layout, that sense of depth, the sense of 3D depth in it. Then I actually have the video that gets mapped to the desk. And again, this is another gradient, and we label this as input C. So in this case now, we have three inputs in this mix effect bus on the TriCaster for the television display, the talent, and the video that's displayed on the front of the desk. But you'll notice here, I actually have one other thing up here, which is called talent reflection. Jesse, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So the so one of the things you can do with gradients that we really didn't look at on the vMix side is you can make them semi-transparent. You sort of distort them and position them. You can cut them up. So what I've done here, and I don't know if you can see it in the stream at home, but there is a gradient sitting on the desk that's basically just a 15% transparency. So very, very, translucent. And that allows when the host is moving, the talent is moving, you now see a reflection of them on the desk using this gradient. So you'll notice that I have input A as being the talent reflection as well as input A being the talent. So I'm taking the same video source that's coming in and just laying them out now at an angle that gives you the illusion that we have a reflection on the surface. And again, this adds that next layer of dimensionality to what we're trying to create in the set. You can use this with all types of adjustments now to create different types of reflections, floor reflections. You can darken it to create more shadows. So if you wanted to have something that had more of a shadow coming out across the floor, you can use gradients to do all of these things. And that becomes really, really powerful now. It creates a true illusion of depth in a space which is essentially just stacked flat layers. So the other thing though, let me switch back to uh, the output that we're using here, which is this here. So I'll put to this. So if you look at this, and I think if you can start the talent playing, just so we have this running live, Joe. Yep. Good. So now, if you look at the desk, you should be able to see things where some of that reflection is showing through. And again, the goal is to make it subtle, because what you don't want to do is something that looks garish. The biggest way to give away that you're doing something all virtual is by making it look too shiny, too metallic, too reflective. That's not real life. So you want to do things subtly, and in that subtle thing, you can really get a lot of benefit and you don't have to hit people over the face with it. But there's one other thing I want to show you. So there is something that the TriCaster has that's called Parallax. Now, Parallax is something that we have in real life all the time. If I have objects that are at different distances and I'm moving across in front of those objects, to my perception, the object in the front moves more slowly left to right than the object in the back. So when I'm on this side of an object, I can see behind it, and you sort of see the back moving. And then when I'm on the other side, I can see behind the object from that other angle. So creating that's something that you get gives you a real experience of depth. And it's used a lot in cinematic shots. So if you look at camera work, I mean there are things called trucks and dollies which leverage this parallax effect, the sense of things moving past each other at different rates. That can be a very effective way of sort of selling a shot. And the TriCaster actually lets you do that. So if I switch back here and let's put a camera now in the front of this set. So we want to give this illusion here that we have a camera. Now, if I actually take and just pan across here with the virtual camera that's controlling the set, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, look at how that camera is. Now, let's just pick something else where we zoom side to side somehow, or so you'll see now that there is a shift in perspective. And what I've asked the TriCaster to do is take and create what they call in the TriCaster augmented reality, which is just a parallax effect with a certain percentage. So I think this is 30%, which gives you that sense of, gee, I can sort of see behind this camera and what's going on. So this is an incredibly powerful way to add depth to something in addition to the things we talked about with gradients and reflections. Uh, so this gives you sort of a complete picture of the technical elements that go into sort of making up a 3D set and some of the tricks you can use to sell it as a realistic set. But there are a few things when you look at virtual sets that I think are really important. The virtual set that you're using has to tie in with the real world framing you have in your camera and your lighting. So when you create a virtual set, I think it's really important to understand the direction of the light that you're going to have on the talent in a green screen. You have to understand the lens and the properties of the lens that you're using to shoot that person and make sure that it lines up fairly well with the properties of the lens used to capture the video or the still that's taken to be used as a backdrop or a foredrop. We are able to perceive a lot of things as not being right if visually they don't seem, when I zoom in or pan across or anything, if they don't seem to act like I'd expect it to in real life. And it's not that somebody will sit there and go, "Ooh, you didn't use the same lens or use different focal length." No, it's that people just say something isn't right. So I think as we sort of create and build these sets, we have to think beyond just, does this look cool, to does this look real? And so it really comes down to subtlety, understanding that the world's imperfect, but real consistency when it comes to the visuals that you use from cameras and lighting to make sure the virtual elements and the physical elements all line up in a way that people perceive as natural and normal. So I hope this worked for everybody, that it was a good rundown of, virtual sets and how you can use them. uh, there's a lot more in this space, obviously, where you can talk about them from the creative side. I mean, we've done, let me see if I can just show you. I mean, we've done a lot of work with uh, so I just put something up here on the screen here, which shows a 3D modeling. We did this in Lightwave, and we brought it into Photoshop. So you have the ability not just to limit yourself to real world things, but you can actually build very specific detailed sets using 3D modeling as well. So again, all these rules apply, but these are the types of things as you start to think of it. There are a lot more that you can start to do to integrate virtual reality into your production, virtual sets. So, a couple of things though that I want to touch on before we end the show today. The first is that I'm going to be at a conference coming up in New York in November. So it's called the Stream Geek Summit, and it's going to be in New York City. I believe it's at the Dream Downtown Hotel, I believe is the name of it. So it's November 8th in New York City. So you can go online to find out more about it. I believe they have, for a limited time, free virtual tickets if you wanted to join virtually and you're not in the area. But they also have tickets available. But I'm going to be giving a talk there on how to actually start your own live show. Some of the things you need to think about and plan for to build out your own program. So if you'd love to join, I'd love to have you come around and join us there if this is something that you'd be up for doing. Uh, if nothing else, I'd love the chance to meet everybody that's been joining me uh, virtually, effectively on the live stream. So that'd be great if you'd like. Please find out more there. So what we're going to talk about on the next show is actually a little interesting. We're going to talk a bit about video resolution. And I think the key thing, especially as streamers, to understand is that resolution really isn't just about pixels. Resolution is about a lot of other elements that composite a video, or composite is probably the wrong term, that make up all the technical elements that go into pulling a video together. So we'll go into this in a lot more detail, uh, and I hope to see all of you next week as well. Thanks for joining me. Have a great week. See you later.